We don't just make a network, Samira. His eyes gleamed. We make the first real nation since the fall. A united future. Samira felt her heart race. This wasn't just a bigger alliance. This was the beginning of something unstoppable. With Wyatt ruling the east, Zeke and Naomi controlling the west, and Samira leading the charge in the south. They would have the three most powerful steam-driven civilizations under one banner. But Zeke wasn't finished. I've already got a foothold in Nevada, he continued. That means we're near California, Oregon, and Washington. If we take those, we have access to the last untouched resources on the West Coast. Naomi stepped forward. And once we have California, we'll control trade with anyone still surviving in the Pacific. Samira grinned. And once we solidify the South, we'll have the agriculture to feed every city in our empire. Wyatt nodded. And I'll keep the East running, mass-producing machines and weapons to defend what we build. It was all coming together. But then Eleanor spoke up. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we still have one big problem. Samira nodded. The purists. Zeke smiled, tipping his hat. Then it looks like we have our first war. The forgotten warlords. Just as the weight of war settled over the room, Naomi Graves, Zeke's sharp-eyed and no-nonsense sister, cleared her throat. You're all looking at the purists like they're the only problem. She said, arms crossed. But you're forgetting the warlords. The room went still. Naomi stepped forward, placing a detailed map of the former United States on the table. It was old and worn but updated with key territories and power shifts. 3 names were etched into it: New England, Texas, and the Pacific Coast. She pointed to the northeast. New England's warlords never died. They adapted. The New England lords. These were the descendants of the old elite, corporate giants and military officers who survived the fall. They control fortified cities stocked with pre-collapse weapons, submarines, and naval fleets scavenged from what was left of the old world. Their leader, Lord Mercer, is rumored to be the most cunning strategist left in America, and he hates outsiders. Naomi then slid her finger down the map. Then there's Texas. The Texas Confederation. Not much is known about them, but what is known is terrifying. Texas has always been a land of survivalists, ex-military groups, and die-hard independents. They have oil refineries, and factories. Meaning they could create war machines on a level no one has seen since the collapse. Their leader, known only as the Iron Duke, is a ghost. No one has ever seen him, but he rules through fear and overwhelming military force. Finally, Naomi tapped the West Coast. And then there's the Pacific. The Pacific Coalition. California, Oregon, and Washington once had the most advanced technology in the world. If any of it survived, they could be sitting on drones, AI, and energy weapons that make our steam tech look ancient. The people of the Pacific have been isolated for years. Their coastline ravaged by tsunamis and earthquakes, making them unpredictable. Their ruler, the Jade Empress, is as mysterious as she is dangerous. No one knows if she's a single person or a council. But she has spies everywhere. Naomi leaned back, watching the room absorb the information. If any of these warlords join forces, she said, or worse, if the purists join them, we won't just lose. We'll be wiped out. The unknown Midwest. Samira exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the map. And we still don't know what's in the Midwest. Wyatt nodded grimly. The Badlands. The Midwest had been hit hardest by the fall of America. With no coastline, no major surviving power centers, and extreme weather shifts, it had become a wasteland. And no one who went in ever came back. The dangers of the Badlands. Storms are worse than ever. Tornado Alley has become an unstoppable vortex of storms, making settlement nearly impossible. Mutated wildlife and rogue warbands roam freely. Some say even old military bunkers have reawakened. They're still running, protecting secrets buried beneath the land. No one knows who, if anyone, rules it. The Midwest is a blank spot on every map. And something powerful could be lurking within. The decision. Silence filled the room as everyone processed just how big this was getting. Samira felt the weight of it all. They weren't just dealing with the purists anymore. They were about to start a war for the future of North America. Wyatt leaned forward, steel in his voice. So, what's the move? Samira clenched her fists. They needed more allies. They needed to make the first move before their enemies united against them. She took a deep breath and spoke. We don't wait for war to come to us. We go to them first. Fuel, fire, and forgotten friends. As the discussion deepened, Hale frowned and tapped Texas on the map. We've been assuming they have access to old world oil and refineries, he said. But that doesn't make sense. Everyone turned to him. Wyatt nodded slowly. Go on. Hale crossed his arms. The oil fields are dry. Hell, they were already drying up before the collapse. There's no way Texas is running a war machine on fossil fuels. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Then what the hell are they using? Biofuel, Hale answered. It's the only logical option. They have farmland, livestock, and processing facilities. If they've managed to produce enough fuel from corn, algae, or waste, they could be running entire armies on it. Samira exhaled. That means they're not as invincible as we thought. Biofuel is harder to produce, less efficient, and takes up valuable land. If we cut off their supply, their war machines stop rolling. Zeke smirked. That's the first piece of good news I've heard all night. Eleanor, however, wasn't convinced. That's assuming biofuel is all they've got, she said. Even without oil, Texas had access to some of the best military facilities before the collapse. What if they repurposed something? The room went quiet. Hale ran a hand through his beard. If they managed to salvage anything, and repurpose it into a bomb, then we can't even think about attacking. One strike, and we're done. Silence. Samira took a deep breath. They needed to know what Texas was really capable of before making any moves. Old allies in the East. Before they could dwell too long on Texas, Eleanor spoke up. There's someone I need to find, she said. Someone I haven't heard from since New Atlanta was founded. Everyone turned to her. She was my closest ally before the world fell apart. If she's still alive, she'll be in Virginia. And if she's still fighting, then she controls everything north of Georgia and outside of New England. Samira's eyes widened. You mean she's in charge of? Eleanor nodded. The Eastern Coalition. The Eastern Coalition's leader, Admiral Rebecca Voss, controls the entire east coast above Georgia, except for New England. Has the largest naval force on the Atlantic. She specializes in trade, naval warfare, and coastal defense. Ruthless, calculating, and known for sinking enemies before they even reach the shore. Zeke let out a low whistle. Damn. If she's still alive, she might just be our best shot at controlling the eastern seaboard. Eleanor smiled. That's what I'm counting on. Florida's wild card. Hale leaned against the table, smirking. Since we're digging up old friends, there's someone I need to find too. Samira raised an eyebrow. Who? Hale's grin widened. A man named Deacon Rojas. He rules Florida. The room reacted immediately. Florida had always been an enigma since the collapse, cut off from the mainland. Surrounded by water, storms, and alligator-infested swamps. Naomi scoffed. Florida? You mean the land of lunatics? Hale laughed. Exactly. And Deacon's the craziest of them all. The Florida Armada's leader, Deacon Rojas, rules all of Florida and its surrounding waters. Has the most powerful fleet of ships in the Gulf of Mexico. He specializes in naval raids, guerrilla warfare, and amphibious assaults. Wild, unpredictable, and completely untrustworthy. Wyatt frowned. So why the hell would we trust him? Hale shrugged. Because Florida and Texas hate each other. They always have. If we can convince Deacon that Texas is trying to take the Gulf for themselves, he'll go to war with them just for fun. Samira rubbed her chin. Texas and Florida competing for dominance. That could be exactly what we need. The next steps. Wyatt clapped his hands together. All right then. We've got our plan. 1. Eleanor will travel to Virginia to find Admiral Rebecca Voss and bring the Eastern Coalition into the alliance. 2. Hale will go to Florida to convince Deacon Rojas to challenge Texas for control of the Gulf. 3. Samira and Wyatt will gather intelligence on Texas' true military capabilities and their biofuel production. Zeke grinned. And I'll be making sure you all don't get yourselves killed before we even get started. Samira took a deep breath. The real war hadn't started yet. But it was coming and they needed to be ready. Allies, spies, and a new threat from the south. With the plan set in motion, Eleanor prepared to leave for Virginia. But before she could board one of Havenfield's steam-powered carriages, Naomi Graves stepped in front of her. I'm coming with you, Naomi said bluntly. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I don't recall asking for company. You don't have to, Naomi replied. If Voss controls the Eastern Coalition, she's the biggest naval power we've got. I need to see it for myself. Wyatt crossed his arms. Naomi, we need you here. She shook her head. You've got Samira and Zeke. If Voss is as powerful as you say, then we need to make sure she's really on our side. Or at least that she doesn't stab us in the back later. Eleanor sighed but didn't argue. She knew Naomi was right.